Have you thought about starting a podcast? Maybe you have one, but it doesn't seem like it's actually working. Today, I'm joined by my client, Caroline Hull, a podcasting strategist, manager, and CEO of Wild Home Podcasting, a boutique podcast management agency and a homeschool mom who helps online business owners create strategic podcasts to help grow their businesses. She discovered her intense love for podcasts after launching her own podcast and in the process, discovering what a powerful tool for growth a podcast can be. Caroline believes that everyone has a unique perspective and a story worth sharing. She has a passion for helping online business owners share their stories and generate leads through their podcast. She shares podcast strategies and tips each week on the Share, Strategize, and Shine podcast. I was on the podcast earlier this year. I will make sure that we link that in the show notes. But today, we're going to talk all things podcasting. So, if a podcast is right for you, how to determine its success, promoting your podcast on social media, and her experience inside my signature program, Money Mastery Academy. So, let's get to it. Here we go. Welcome, Caroline. I'm so excited to have you on the Your Money, Your Life podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm a big fan, so very glad to be here.
I love that. So, the first question I always ask is, what does your money, your life mean to you?
Oh, goodness. I think if you'd asked me this a year ago, I would have had a completely different answer. And now I definitely think that the money isn't as important as having a life that I love and knowing that the money will be there to support that. I've spent a lot of my life being super stressed out by money. And so being in a place where I'm not super stressed about it, I know it'll be there for what I need it to do. But the most important thing is that I'm living my life on my terms, if that makes sense. And so that's where I've landed on money and life these days.
I love it. And, it makes 100% sense. 100% sense. Yeah, that made sense. All right. But I'm not surprised because that was me and I attract a lot of me, like as a client of my clients are me. So,
Absolutely. That's probably why I connected so much with you because I was like, I relate 10,000% to everything you're
mhm,
saying.
I love it. Now, tell me a little bit about your journey with your podcast and how you became a podcast coach.
Yeah, I kind of fell into podcasting. So I was actually a stationery designer. So greeting cards, wedding invitations. And one thing I found out, I mean, this is so long ago. I don't remember. I was going to say the name of the app and now, oh, Periscope. I don't know if you remember Periscope. I mean, this is like back in the day, friends. And I started a little like Periscope channel where I was doing like business advice, and I was like, oh, I really like this. I think it would be cool to start a podcast. And I just happened to post in a group of other artists. I think it'd be fun to start a podcast. And my co-host with my first podcast commented and said, I would love to start a podcast. And we were like, we should do it together. And so we started a podcast. And it really took off. We created a huge community. We were selling products associated with it. And during that experience, I fell in love with the back end of podcasting. And I'll be 100% honest with you. I was looking for an out. The greeting card world had not been super kind to me. I didn't feel like I was good at it. I wanted something that didn't tie me to a certain space because I was packaging orders and stuff all the time. So I was always up in my office and I homeschooled my kids. They were getting older and I wanted to be able to be downstairs with them. And one of my friends asked me to help her with her podcast. And I said yes. And then I started helping somebody else and it just rolled, after that, just snowballed after that. And so I really started just editing podcasts for people. But what I quickly discovered was that a lot of business owners were not using their podcasts to its fullest potential. And that's where the coaching piece started to come into place.
Yeah. And so I'm thinking like, okay, Periscope, that was probably the days where you just had a podcast, like you were like, just start a podcast. Like you would get famous overnight, you would get all the downloads, like just byproduct those days,
It,
right?
Yes, exactly. Like anybody could start a podcast and get like 1,000 downloads per episode right off the bat. It was such a different world than the podcasting world is today.
And yeah, absolutely. Okay, this is going to work great because my next question was, how do you know if you should have a podcast? Because we get so many of those, like, we should do this,
Mm.
all in the business world, but like, what is a good indicator that you should have a podcast if you don't have one already?
Yeah, there's a couple things I want to say. One is if you love audio, and I know that seems like a no-brainer, but like you have to love this format and you have to feel comfortable with it. You know, some people are really great at YouTube, some people are really great at podcasts. I'm not great at YouTube. I'm really good at podcasts, you know? And I've tried YouTube over and over and over. It never works for me, but I love sitting behind a microphone and just riffing and talking and all of those kinds of things. So that's the first thing. The second thing you really need to think about as a business owner is, do I have any long form content in my marketing arsenal? So when we think about marketing, what all of our marketing is doing is building our brand, right? It's creating this image that the world has of who we are and what we do, right? And how we show up in different places in different ways. So, how I show up on Instagram is very different than how I show up in my long form content. Now, long form content can be anything, it can be videos, it can be audio, it can be blog posts. What do you enjoy doing? And what I find with podcasting is that what it's really good for is nurturing and warming leads. And so, if you're looking for something to kind of cross that bridge between all the short form content you're putting out, even like your email newsletter, you want something that's just going to kind of be like a warm hug to your people, then I would say like definitely consider a podcast. But I also want to like put a caveat on this. Just because you start a podcast does not mean your business is going to blow up. And I think that's something really important. It's just like I start an Instagram account doesn't mean my business is going to blow up. Just because I start a YouTube account doesn't mean my business is going to blow up. So if you're looking for something to fix your marketing, then definitely do not say, I'm going to start a podcast. My marketing is going to be amazing. I'm going to blow up. I'm going to have 1 million downloads. I'm here to just squash that right now and say what you need is a strategy and to understand how your long form content works in the overall picture of your business and that brand that you're trying to build.
I love it. And it was probably really fortunate when I started my podcast. I had really only been a podcast listener for about 4 or 5 months. And it was only because I had started working with Allison Hardy, which I think is where we
Yes.
connected. She shared my stoplight reel. Um,
Yes. Love her. Love Allison.
but she had a podcast, and I was like, okay, like I'm in her world now. I should start listening to her podcast. And I had done the video, like that was my thing, like video, Facebook Lives. I had a weekly live show for forever, but the time slot wasn't going to work anymore. And as
Mm,
life continued to get busy, I was watching less and less videos myself and more podcasts. So I made the
mm,
switch. But the thing that Allison always talked about it as was like, this is, it was just like a nerd component. So I went into it without the expectations every single episode or whatever that might be. So that was, I love like hindsight 2020, seeing that I came in with that perception, because I think if I had had that and then seeing like what reality was would have been totally different. So that was really golden for everybody that's listening. And of course, I love that you talk about that it is like our overall marketing strategy. Of course, like the long form piece of content. Yay. Um, but I know I've heard you mention several times, and I just went through one of your workshops recently about like creating pod or measuring podcast success. I think it was what it was called. But
yes.
you talk about the podcast being part of the funnel of your funnel. So, how do we know if that funnel is working? Like we decided, yes, we need a podcast. We're going to do all those things. Like, how do you know if it's working?
Yeah. And this is honestly, I'm so glad you asked this question because I think this is where a lot of business owners get tripped up because they automatically think, okay, if I have this piece of content, and we can really apply this to anything, right? We can apply this to Instagram, we can apply this to YouTube, everything. If I'm creating content here, this is going to equal sales. Or this is going to equal people buying my thing. They just kind of put that arbitrarily out there. Like we've been told because we see messages out there. If you show up, if you do this thing, this will be your result. And so a lot of people start a podcast, as you mentioned, without really considering it as a piece of their funnel, but without having a specific goal in mind. And this is what I really drive home when I teach podcast strategy is what is the purpose of your podcast? Like get very specific. Is it to grow your email list? Is it to grow your membership? Are you trying to convert people into a group program? Are you wanting to sell more of your one-on-one services? Like, why is your podcast here? What is it doing? How is it serving people in your funnel? And from there, we can measure, okay, is it working for me? Because at the end of the day, you can have 1 million downloads and not be getting any sales, right, from your podcast. You can have 30 downloads and every time you post an episode, be getting somebody new into your membership. And so it really is, okay, what is my goal for my podcast? What is my goal for this as it relates to my funnel? And then how am I going to show up on my podcast in a way that is going to serve that goal and welcome in the results for the goal that I have?
I love that. And I'll have to say, like, that was one of my biggest takeaways from the workshop recently, the one that I was on with you. It's like, okay, I know what my goal is with the podcast, but it felt like, we had to hit this certain thing before like that was even trackable. Cause, I love numbers, of course. Like I've been
Yeah,
tracking
yeah.
the numbers and you see the growth, but you feel it was almost like, which is funny because, this is what I talk about. Like you don't have to hit like that income level yet before you can see success. And I was doing that with my podcast goal. So I'm really excited for some tweaks that I'm making. And of course, like listeners, stay tuned for that because I'm sure it's going to be a much better experience for you as well. So yeah, I total testament to that. Like if you have a podcast, I would highly like we're gonna give links to check out to connect with Caroline, of course, because yeah, you need that. Can we
Can I
talk
give
about oh go for it.
oh, I was gonna say, can I give a really good example to drive home this point?
Yes.
I have a client that I worked with in December. We did a strategy call before Christmas, and this is somebody who was getting some of her episodes or upwards of 4,000 downloads an episode. This is a lot. This is like putting you in the top 1% of all podcasts. But she has a membership and she wasn't getting any members from her podcast. She wasn't seeing any quote unquote results, right? And so we said, okay, well, what is your goal? She's like, I want to get new members into my membership. And so that allowed us to rework her content and think about everything that her podcast was doing from a different angle. What is so cool about this is so she went and implemented all this. I didn't do it for her. She did all the hard work, right? I just basically gave her a roadmap. And she told me a couple weeks ago that her episodes go out on Thursdays. Every Thursday, when her episode goes out, she gets 2 to 3 new members in her membership. And so that's a really good example of like how skewed we can be when we think our podcast is successful but it may not actually be doing the thing that you want it to do. And that's why I really think not focusing so much on the download numbers, but focusing on the purpose is so much more important.
I love it. That's an amazing example. Um, so yes, because I was blown away by that when I heard the story a couple weeks. Was it last week? Whenever that was, recently. April's been crazy when we're recording this in
Oh, let me
April.
tell you. Yeah.
Can we talk about social media promo and podcasts for a little bit? Because I feel like
Yeah.
there's been all sorts of things, like, information that we know isn't good anymore, and then information that might be good. So like just what the heck should we be doing?
I know. This is one of the hardest things about having a podcast is, right, like telling people who are over here to go over there. And I feel like that's with everything. Like I feel like even on my podcast, I'll say, go follow me on Instagram. I don't know if people from my podcast are actually doing that. Um, but what I want you to focus on is repurposing the content. So you've spent all this time creating a podcast episode, you've written show notes, you've posted it on your blog. If you're listening and you haven't done any of these things, these are things that you should be doing as a business owner with a podcast. Okay. And then what's so great is then you have this amazing piece of content that you can pull so much from. So, what I always encourage people to do is to think about a carousel that you can create from your podcast episode. Pull out one point, create a carousel. On the last slide, have it be telling them to go listen to the episode or comment, podcast, I'll send you the link to the episode kind of thing. Now, as it relates to reels, it's so funny because I was actually having this conversation this morning in my mastermind. They were asking me about audiograms, and audiograms are those still images you see with a little waveform. And 3 years ago, audiograms were just the bee's knees. I mean, you posted those, you got like thousands of views, and everybody went and listened to your podcast. Now you post them, you get like 10, and nobody even knows it's there. And so we've had to get really creative about how we show up on Instagram as podcasters. I think one of the first things you need to understand is, what does Instagram like? Instagram likes short form video, right? They don't like still images with waveforms. That's not what Instagram likes. And this is where it kind of gets complicated because podcasting is an audio format. That's why we love it, is because we're behind a microphone. If you're a busy mom like me, you can do it when your hair is a mess, whatever. And now they're telling us that we should be on video. And so you have to kind of decide for yourself, okay, do I want to be on video? So what I do is I record myself recording my podcast episodes, and I use those to create clips to post on Instagram. And I have seen the best traction with those. One of my clients, she's actually coming on my podcast probably about the same time that this episode is being released. And I asked her about this. She's an Instagram strategist. And I asked her on that episode, I said, what should we be doing? And she suggested, and I thought this was a really great idea, to even just take the audio, like an audio clip from your podcast, and put it against some B-roll, and then share that. And so, like, if you don't want to film yourself, again, because it's audio, that's a good idea. But I think really the key to all of this is to repurpose what you already have. And so even if I'm looking at my show notes, I have a bullet point, I can create a reel from that bullet point and then tell people, hey, go listen to this episode. Do that. Like, use what you've already created. You don't have to go over to Instagram and reinvent the wheel. Like, just repurpose what you've created, point people to the episode to dive deeper, because that's what the podcast is there for. It's a deeper dive, right? It's that nurturing. So taking people from short form to long form to hopefully email list, buy, etc. So that would be my suggestion. It's definitely something you need to play with and see what your audience likes most. But I have found, for me, doing those video clips and then doing the carousels have been really impactful.
I love it. Okay. Yay. So that's essentially what I was doing. And you probably, for me, it's not about like a podcast growth strategy. I don't think I'm really going to get new downloads from that, but it's almost like a reminder for my existing audience. Like, hey, oh yeah, I wanted to go check out that podcast. Is that kind of what you're thinking here?
Exactly. But here's the thing. If you're doing your podcast that way, if you're thinking about it as a nurturing piece, so you're creating your content from a place of, my goal is to help my audience feel seen and heard in this content. I want them to listen to my episode and go, oh my gosh, that's me. She gets me. And understanding that my podcast is not there to be a how-to. My podcast is there to show them why they need to work with me. Eventually, what happens is your downloads start to go up because now you're reaching an aligned audience. And really, I think that's been one of the biggest lessons for me, even as a podcaster. I talk a lot about how I rebranded and completely shifted gears in my podcast. I guess it's been like 2 years ago now. And I had really great download numbers, but my podcast was very how-to-y. It was like how to launch, how to do this, how to do that. Like, and the problem is that I had a lot of listeners, but I wasn't converting. And so we rebranded, we shifted gears. I started talking more about podcast strategy. And now all of a sudden I'm getting people booking like strategy sessions and things with me. Granted, my downloads are a lot less than they used to be. And I get frustrated by that sometimes, just as anybody else would. And there's a lot of other factors at play because how podcast downloads are measured has changed significantly over the last 3 years. But all that to say, even though those numbers are down, what I'm seeing now is because my content is so aligned, I'm getting more people on my email list. I'm getting more people on my membership. What are my goals for my podcast? But I'm starting to see those downloads go up. And the quality of listeners is so much better. They're hanging out, they're sticking around, they're engaging in other places, they're telling me they've listened to my episodes. And those are some other ways that like, okay, this is working. And so, even if you are more focused on like the purpose piece, the conversion piece, using it as a funnel piece, if you're doing it with intention and you're creating that aligned content, you're going to see the downloads start to follow.
I love it. And it's a lot of like the same Instagram strategy because we always hear like you want more followers, you want more followers. Like you really don't need more followers necessarily. And this is again the same thing we talk about with money. Like it's not necessarily like you always need to have more. It's you need to have the right strategy. You need to have the right things in place. And I love how it
Yeah,
follows us everywhere. Like that whole like you're already successful. My post that I literally just posted earlier today, like this is what that's talking about. Like because you already have
right.
that there. We just need to see it in all areas of life, including our podcast. So before we kind of switch gears real quick, is there a question or something that people need to know about podcasts and podcast strategy because I know for myself, like sometimes we get on these interviews and we talk, and it's like, okay, but I really just need my clients to know this, or my prospects, people who are going to be clients, to know this, because when you understand this, like then everything else makes sense.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing with podcasting and any kind of long form content marketing strategy is that it's a marathon, not a sprint. This isn't something you can start tomorrow, do for 5 episodes, and then decide if it was successful or not. This is something like if you're going to do it, I want you to give it at least 6 months, if not a year, to see the impact it has. Because there are so many things that can happen in other areas, such as it can help you refine your messaging. It can help you start to form connections and create a network. There's a lot of other, I call them intangibles, that can happen with anytime you're creating content. I mean, I feel the same way about my Instagram. We could have like an hour-long conversation about how my Instagram has been in the tank. And when I switch gears on my content, I have started to see the fruits of that. And the same is with any kind of marketing. And so when people come to me, when my clients come to me and they say, I don't know if this is successful, and I'm like, how many episodes have you done? And they're like, I've done 10. I'm like, well, okay, let's talk about that. Let's get to 25 before we make any decisions. So just know that if you're going to start a podcast for your business, you need to make a commitment to give it some time before you really judge, okay, is this actually working for me?
Perfect. Okay. Now, you have been inside my Money Mastery Academy for the last several months. And so for
Yes.
anybody who's considering the program, can you share a little bit about like why you enrolled with the program and kind of what you've seen as a result of being inside the academy?
Yeah. So you came on my podcast last year and we had such a great conversation, and we had a great conversation off camera, off the microphone. And I was in a really not great spot last year. I had had major hip surgery. My business was not doing well, to be completely honest. There's been a lot of changes in the podcast industry, and I was not shifting with them. But I also just want to say too, like I think I had lost my purpose in my business. And my husband was working a ton, and he was working all this overtime, and I was working, and it felt like we didn't have any money. And I have tried all kinds of budgeting. I have tried every tool out there. I've tried every spreadsheet. I've watched all the Netflix documentaries. I've read several books, and I just could not understand why at my age we couldn't seem to get our financial act together. And it just seemed like nothing was working. And the problem with And I'm sure a lot of you can relate to this. The problem with finances is that when it starts to affect your marriage, you know that there's a big problem. And I mean, we were unhappy. We were unhappy. And a lot of it just stemmed from a lot of the struggles we were having around money. We had gotten ourselves into debt. I have business debt, we had personal debt, and it just seemed like we were just drowning. So I knew that I needed to not only work on how I was handling my money, like how I was actually looking at it and thinking about it, but I really needed to work on my mindset. And that's really why I joined because you and I had talked and you had said this is the piece that you're going to work on. It's not just about a spreadsheet. You're actually going to work on the mindset piece. And so that was really the catalyst for me joining. I mean, I just really hit a breaking point and I needed something to change.
I remember that because we were talking in Instagram and I was like, hey, I'm doing like this special on the Academy. Like, if it's for you, great. And I remember that message back. It was like, okay, yes, like, thank you. This is what I needed because I knew I needed something. Wasn't sure if it was like the mindset or the finance side. And like, here's both. That works great. So I'm so glad that you've been able to be here. So where are you feeling relief now? What has been like the most beneficial part of being inside the academy the last couple months?
Yeah. First of all, I think I messaged you this, like your system for keeping track of your expenses and managing like the checks that you put into place and things has probably been the best system I've ever come across for me. And like and to be quite honest, I was completely overwhelmed the first time I downloaded your spreadsheet and looked at it because I was like, oh, numbers everywhere. How do I use this? But now I love it. And like we got into this really great habit where I would set it up every paycheck and then I would screenshot it and send it to my husband. Um, but what I loved about it so much was that it wasn't budgeting in the way that I had grown up thinking budgeting was, where you were sitting down and you were writing. I remember watching my mom sitting down with her checkbook ledger, like writing down each and every expense and income. I mean, I was never going to do that. And so I love this method because it's just so much easier for me. It makes a lot more sense. But I think the biggest piece has been not being scared of my money. So I was definitely in that avoidance phase. I wouldn't look at my bank account. Um, it was just, we would overdraft all the time and it was like whatever. And now we're at this place where like we don't overdraft anymore. We're managing it. And like let me tell you this too, because like you and I haven't even talked about this. So my husband ended up getting a new job about a month ago. And he's actually making less than he was before. And it doesn't feel like he's making less. Does that make sense? Like,
It
and it's,
does. I love it.
yeah, and it's simply because I wasn't scared of the amount. Like he was stressing about it so much. And I was like, no, we'll be fine. Like I got the percentages. We'll just adjust it in the spreadsheet. It'll be great. And it's been amazing. And so if he had said that to me a year ago, I would have been absolutely not. Like you cannot switch jobs. But what I really want to drive home about this him switching jobs, like we were never seeing him. He was working so much. I'm like literally about to tear up. He was working so much we never saw him. We had no family life. The kids maybe saw him 30 minutes before they went to bed at night. That was the only time they saw him. If they needed extra, he would go in and do extra. He was doing all of this extra stuff, and we were always broke. And it just felt like, what is he working for? And now he's home all the time. He's making less money. It doesn't feel like less money. And our family life is so much better. And I really think like taking this opportunity to focus on this, I didn't want to do it, Aimee. Like I did not want to do it because I just had this story in my head that I was bad at money. I wasn't good at it. And it's because of the way that I approach it, it's helped him change the way he approaches it, and it's just helped our entire family. On top of that, it's also helped me make some much better decisions for myself and my business as well. I ended up letting go of almost all of my team so I could increase my profit margin. Um, And a lot of this also too comes back to like going back into mindset and thinking about purpose. Like, why am I here? Why am I doing this? What is the point of this? And so that's also led me to making some big shifts in my business. So it really was like I had reached a breaking point with my financial situation. That was the catalyst for me joining your program. And then your program has like been the catalyst for me doing other things that have, I think, I think a year from now, we're going to be so happy with all these changes we've made. And it's not that I increased my bottom line, it's not that I increased my income, but I really changed and reframed my relationship with money and how I think about it. So,
And it's changed your life with you get to have time with your husband and everything now. This is why it's your money, your life. Always love when I can
yeah.
bring it back to the title there. Thank you so much for sharing that. I so appreciate that. And I so love hearing
Yeah.
all of that. So why don't you, I think you have a free gift for our listeners. Why don't you tell us about that real quick? And then, of course, where they can find you online.
Yeah. So if you have a podcast and you're thinking about, okay, how should I structure it for sales? How should I set up my episode? I have the perfect download for you. You can head to wildhomepodcasting.com/sales. And inside that, you will actually find like a template for how you should set up your solo podcast episodes. And that's also a really great place to start if you're just wondering, okay, how do I start thinking about my podcast episodes as a sales mechanism for my business? So definitely start there. And then you can find me at wildhomepodcasting.com, and I'm on Instagram at wildhomepodcasting.
I will make sure we include all those links for y'all in the description and the show notes. Also, we just did a flash sale on Money Mastery Academy, but if you're listening now and you're like, okay, crap, I missed out, I need in on Money Mastery Academy, send me a message on Instagram with the word Caroline, and I'll get you a special back end link for that. Okay,
Woo woo.
that's it for now. We'll see you later, guys. If you're struggling with shame and guilt around your finances, whether it's debt, impulse spending, mistakes from the past, or the fact that you still haven't hit your income goal, then it's time for you to work with me. There are different levels of support and price points that you can use on the path to removing that guilt and shame so you can step into your unstoppable life. After all, your finances are unique to you, and your support should be too. Go to workwithaimee.com to get started with one of my most popular programs, or you can book a Q&A call with me and we'll figure out what that next step should be. And those links are hanging out in the description of this video as well.